it is without a shadow of a doubt that this year, well, not only this year, but last year, on a lot, in fact, the vast majority, if not all, of the working class families in the UK have been incredibly suffering. Not just them, but hundreds of thousands of people who have found themselves suddenly without a job, um, unable to go to work, and are still in the threat of facing joblessness. And this is something that our government really has to take care and pay attention to. The problem, of course, is that the current Conservative Party is being run by a group of, as we always call them, free market fundamentalists who are obsessed with the idea that the government should have nothing whatsoever at all to do with the economy. So, the question really comes, what is Rishi Sunak going to do about this coming economic crisis? Because it's not just around COVID, it's after and how we get out. And the thing is, we saw how the Conservatives tried, and in air quotes I put tried, to get out of the of the 2010 crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. Their idea for that was austerity, and look how well that turned out. It turned into an absolute catastrophe. So we now have to seriously ask the question of what is Rishi Sunak's plan to get us out of this. I worry it is going to be austerity on steroids. Now, before we get into today's article asking this same question, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page as well as a one-off donation link. And thank you very much for watching. Right, let's jump into it then, shall we? So, this comes from The Guardian, and without a long-term plan, Rishi Sunak risks wrecking Britain's economy. The government's response to COVID has been one of political brinkmanship. It dithered over the enforcement of a first, second, and even third lockdown, despite the scientists warning that restrictions were necessary. It gave businesses very little clarity about the continuation of the furlough scheme in the autumn, leading to a wave of redundancies. It informed teachers that schools would remain open throughout January before abruptly U-turning on this very assertion. The same goes for the economic support it has offered to businesses affected by the third lockdown. Following Boris Johnson's announcement of new restrictions across England, Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced a pledge and a packet of economic measures, including £9,000 grants for retail, leisure and hospitality businesses forced to close. These grants will provide a margin of much needed relief to businesses, especially because they are grants rather than loans. But they are still they are still falling far short of what is actually needed to stabilise the economy and support people to comply with the new measures. Many businesses should have shouldered a huge amount of risk during the pandemic. They have taken on large debts, which they are being forced to have pay off for years, if they can even make it through the crisis. And there's no certainty over whether the furlough scheme will continue beyond April, even if restrictions remain in place. While the Chancellor has offered £4.6 billion in support, the Bank of England figures from December show firms face a £180 billion drop in cash flow, a figure likely to rise with the result of the latest lockdown. So, as you can see, it ain't looking good. And none of this stuff has been really, goes further. Like, the furlough scheme set to end in April, not just the furlough scheme, but the extra boost to universal credit also set to end in April, which will take away over £1,000 from families who have been suffering throughout this crisis, many who, families who've now got no job to go back to. This is the crisis that we now face. And if we are to try and get out of it, we need some serious creative thinking. And we cannot go back into austerity. But I think that's the plan Sunak is going to fall back onto. And we are going to be even in a worse situation, because if you thought the last 10 years were bad under austerity, then I don't think you ain't seen nothing yet. So a £9,000 grant may keep the landlord from the door in the short term, but it's unlikely to prevent some businesses and shop owners from shutting up shop in the face of serious uncertainty. And I'd also like to point out that as of Monday, the government's ban on people being evicted by bailiffs also is set to be lifted. So we're going to see people evicted during this time of... It's just absolute madness. It really is. And I can't believe they're going to do it. But if you do want to help support people who are going through that, then I urge you to go to Shelter's website, sign their petition to urge the government to perform a U-turn on this decision. But also, you'll find numerous local campaigns and whatnot for people around in your area. So do go give them a visit and help people out in your area, because a lot of people are desperate for any kind of support they can get. So anyway, it continues. And of course, the 594 million that has already been allocated to business outside the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors in these latest measures is just a drop in the ocean. And particularly for the many businesses that supply these sectors, such as manufacturers, for instance, while car showrooms will receive support because they're classified as retailers, car manufacturers, however, will be left out in the cold. And although Sunak says that he will review the measures in the early March budget, this will be too late to give businesses and employees the certainty that they need. To provide more certainty, he could start by guaranteeing that the furlough scheme will continue during any future restrictions that prevent businesses from opening. Cash support from businesses should be about 10 times more generous to avoid them collapsing under a mountain of debt. And that doesn't mean that we should settle for a stream of government handouts to the private sector. Where risks are socialised, the public should share in the rewards. In the countries such as Germany, it is the norm for the state to take equity in businesses in return for an injection of cash. This should be done in the UK throughout a national investment bank, or Project Birch, the government's bailout plan for companies during the pandemic. Ultimately, the future of UK businesses relies on the success of the government's public health strategy. Sunak has been repeatedly cautious of lockdowns for fear of their impact on the economy. This is mistaken. The sooner this virus is controlled, the sooner the economy can reopen, and the sooner we can escape this cycle of endless lockdown and release. These are measures that Sunak could put in place now to help make the lockdown shorter and less painful for a lot of people. And many people will face impossible choices between maintaining their family's income and protecting others by self-isolating. If the government is serious about bringing down the R number, they should start by raising the UK's woefully inadequate statutory sick pay, which stands at just £95 a week, and extending it to workers who aren't currently eligible, and those who are instructed to self-isolate and can't do their jobs should be paid the living wage for doing so. Families need certainty too. The eviction ban expires in just 5 days, putting renting families at risk of homelessness, and it is extraordinary the government plans to cut universal credit payments that many are relying on by about £20 a week in April. These issues simply cannot wait. Only by addressing these underlying issues will the government ensure this third lockdown is effective as possible. Rather than using his March budget to firefight, the Chancellor should set out a proper recovery plan. His challenge is to stabilise the economy while investing for the future. That should include an ambitious fiscal stimulus. In the IPPR estimates is at a total of 164 billion is needed for the next financial year. To invest in measures to reach net zero emissions, to meet pledges to level up, and to rebuild public services to avoid the NHS reaching breaking point in the future. From the IMF to the ODEC, the economic consensus is clear. We can't cut our way out of this crisis, no matter what the Chancellor's Conservative instincts are. Opting for half measures and delaying the inevitable may help to manage the lockdown sceptics within the Conservative Party. But this is no way to manage public health or an economy. Instead, the Chancellor must offer businesses and families the certainty needed to reach the light at the end of the tunnel. 100% agree with that. 100% agree. And that is my worry, what was said at the end of there. To try and please the lockdown sceptics, to try and please the free market fundamentalists currently within the Conservative Party, Sunak will just fall into the old Conservative ways of, we are just going to cut ourselves out of this economy. We're just going to cut down on everything. You know, everywhere we can. Cut. Snip. It'll be impossible. And it will leave us in a far, far worse state. We got to where we are today because of Tory austerity. And we cannot go through another decade of Tory austerity. To do that again to the people of the UK will be an absolute. It's going to cause even more problems, even ones that we can't yet predict, and it's going to go beyond families falling into poverty or being evicted from their houses, or facing joblessness. We could see what happened in America happen here. Because it could be very easily someone come along and start to foment that anger that the Tories have created. So with that, thanks for watching. As always, please do remember to hit the like and share button on your way out. And of course, there is a link down below to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link should you like to support the channel in that way. And as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you all next time.